In the previous chapters, we have talked about how to create your own function in Python. Now, we are going to look at some of the predefined functions in the standard Python library. So where do we go for that? Click on built-in functions. Now, there are so many different functions and we cannot possibly discuss all of them, nor can we learn all of them at one go. And you don't have to. Why do we need? If you want something, say you want to find out the mean of a bunch of numbers or the average of a bunch of numbers. Maybe there is a function in Python, something that's built in. You don't have to really know it. Maybe you can just do a Google search, and if there is a function that Python provides, it will just show up in the Python library. Look at the documentation and use it. What we are trying to do here is trying to look at some of the most commonly used Python library functions, like length of a string. And in fact, these functions here can be used over a wide variety of use cases. Like for example, this function len, which we have kind of used already, can be used to find out the length of a string, the length of a list, the length of a tuple. So basically it's like a Swiss Army knife. It's useful across a broad range of data types. And same thing with min and max. You can find out the min and max of many different data types. So we'll look at some of the most commonly used functions that are built into Python, just to show you how these inbuilt functions work. And like I told you, these are not exhaustive. They're just a handful. If you want to find out the exhaustive list of functions, click on this link, list of inbuilt Python functions. You see, these are all the built-in functions. See, there are so many of them, right? Probably 50 or 60 of them. Like I said, we're not interested in learning all of them, just a few. Now let's start with the length function. It's len, L-E-N. So what is the length of a string? So say the string is Ajay Tech. What's the length of the string? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the blank. 6, 7, 8, 9. So the length of this string is 9. Let's try this. Name equals Ajay Tech. And then you use the len function. Then say name. So the length of the string is 9. Now let's look at a couple more examples. What is the length of an integer? Is there a length for an integer? No, not really. So this function length is context sensitive. So how does this length work? Why doesn't it work for an integer? The key concept here is that when you use the length function or len of something, this something should be an iterable. We have already seen the word iterable. For example, the range function is an example of an iterable. Range of 1, 100 or range of 100. Basically a range of 100 numbers. Think of that as an array or a list. 1, 2, 3, so on until 100. When we come to data structures, which is the next section, we'll talk about lists, dictionaries, tuples. There are also examples of iterables. So an iterable is just a sequence of objects. I specifically say objects because it could be a sequence of integers, sequence of strings, sequence of any kind of object. Numbers, strings, floating points, any array of objects. So when you use the len function, Python expects that you pass an iterable. If there is no iterable, it doesn't know what to do. And that's the reason why if you say len of 1, which is a number, execute, it says object of int has no len. It doesn't work, right? Now let's look at the range example. If you give a range of 100 numbers, does it have a length? Yes, it does. The simple reason being it's an iterable. Numbers equals range of 100 length of numbers is 100 because that's an iterable. Alright, so that's the length function. Let's look at the next function, ABS. ABS stands for absolute. Absolute of what? Absolute of a number. This is useful when you want to know the magnitude of a number and not the sign, if it is positive or negative. Here is a simple example. Let's say there's a number minus 28 and you want to find out what's the magnitude, what's the actual number irrespective of the sign. Now, if there was no ABS function, how would you do it? You would look at the number and then you have to write some logic. If number, say num equals minus 28, if num less than 0, right, then num equals num into minus 1, which is basically flipping the sign. Else, you don't have to do anything. Now, after executing this little logic, you'll get the magnitude of the number. Instead of doing all that, you can just say if the num is equal to minus 28, if you say ABS of num, you get the absolute value. This will be equal to 28. You want to try it? Let's try it. Num equals minus 28. ABS of num is equals 28. So that's how the absolute function works. Now, in case you're wondering why you would ever use this function, let me give you a simple example. Say there is a complex calculation and finally you arrive at a number. And because of the way that calculation is done, say it could end up with a positive or a negative number. But we are not interested in the sign of the number, but we are only interested in what that number is actually. And you do not know upfront if the number is going to end up as a positive number or a negative number. In cases like that, you can use the ABS function, which will ensure that the age is always positive. Another example, say there is a user form and the user has entered his age as minus 28. Well, you could always take care of this upfront using a UI feature, like filter it and say no negative signs allowed. You see that on your websites, right? Say you fill up a form for your bank application or your college application and you're entering your age. If the user fills up minus 28, either as a prank or unintentionally, and if this value is passed on to you, and in Python, you want the actual age, you don't want minus 28, right? So you can use the ABS function and say ABS of age, and that will be 28, irrespective of what the user enters. I'm just giving you some simple use cases. Let's talk another example. Say you're given a problem. The user enters an year like 1988 or 2056 and say today is 2019, the year. Depending on the user's input, you want to output how many years we are away from that user entered year. For example, 1988 to 2019 is this is 12 plus 19, that is 31, right? And this is, I think, 37, right? How do you do it? A simple way to do it would be get the current year, which is 2019. Python can give it to you using the date function, and get the user entered year, 2056 or 1988, any number that the user enters. Just do a subtraction. Now, in case the user entered year is greater, you get negative number, and in case the user entered year is less than the current year, you get a positive number. And you don't want to give the output as either positive or negative. You want the output to be an absolute number. How many years are we from the current year? All you got to do is ABS of that difference and you get the absolute number. Alright, so let's take a quick quiz. Age equal to minus 28, print ABS of age. You see, this is a string, not a number. What happens? Will ABS work with non-integers? Well, we don't know. Let's try. If age is a string, what is absolute of age? Let's say age is minus 28 of string, not a number. Oops, it doesn't work. Bad operand type for ABS. So ABS doesn't take strings. It only takes numbers. So this code will result in a syntax error. Alright, the next one is min and max functions. Min and max. Min for minimum, max for maximum. Simple enough, right? When would you use these functions? Well, if there is a list of numbers, you want to find out the minimum element, you can use the min function. If there is a string of which you want to find out what is alphabetically the last element or the first element, you can use the min max functions. For example, in this case, in the string Ajay tag, what's the last number alphabetically? That's Y, right? A, B, C, D all the way through Y. And then all you have is Z. So max of the string will give you Y. And similarly, max of a range of numbers 1 to 100 will give you the last number, which is either 99 or 100, depending on how you define that range. So if you have a string and then you say max of name, you get the last character alphabetically. And similarly, you can have a min function, right? The min function is blank, not A. Say we don't have a blank. What happens? What do you expect? Min of name is A. Same thing with the range. N equals range of 100, a range of 100 numbers. Min of n will be 0 and max of n will be 99 because the range itself goes from 0 to 99. Okay, let's look at another challenge. So there is a range of numbers 0 through 99. What is the min of r? Min of r will be 0, right? We have just seen it. Okay, next we will look at these functions: int, float, string, and complex. Now these functions are slightly different. Let me explain what I mean by that. Now we have already used these functions. Why have we used these functions? We have used these functions to convert numbers to strings and strings to numbers. The example is input function. So input age. We want the user to input an age and we have it in the variable age. Now we want to do some manipulations on that number, the age number. Does it work? No, it does not, because by definition, the input function returns a string, not a number. So what did we do? Age equals int of age. So the int function converts a string into a number. Now the vice versa is also possible. You want to convert a number to a string, that's also possible. Use the string function. And that's what we are seeing here. Int is a function that converts something else into a number. And str for string is a function that converts, for example, some other object, say a number, into a string. And same thing with float and complex. They convert other objects into floats and complex numbers. And we have seen the use cases for that, why we need to use them. Input was an example. Let's look at a challenge here. Age underscore 1 is equal to 21, age underscore 2 equal to 22. How to add these two ages together? Now, we've already seen this in some of the previous chapters. Does this work? Age 1 plus age 2? It does not, because 21 is a string, 22 is a string. When you combine these two strings, strings just get concatenated. So you get 21, 22 as a string. And when you convert that to int, you get the number 21, 22, and that's not the right answer. And same thing with this. This acts exactly similar to this, excluding this int function. So what's the correct way? This is the correct way. Convert the first string into an integer, 21. Convert the second string into an integer, 22. Now 21 plus 22 will give you the right answer. And finally, the input function. This is something that we have seen so many times already, right? Input is used to enter text input from the user. Now, we are not talking about graphical inputs or other types of inputs. We are not there yet, and we'll not be covering them in this course. We're just talking about plain console-based text inputs. Enter your age. The user enters it on the console, right? In cases like that, you use the Python's input function. Input, and then this is called the prompt, the text that you show the user so that the user knows what to enter, and it returns a string, and you got to know how to deal with that string. If all you want is a string, like for example a name, then that's fine. If you want a number though, Python wouldn't know if it needs to return you a number or a string. It always returns a string. So it's your duty to convert it into an integer if you think it's an integer, or a float if you think it's a float. Let's say weight. Weight of a person is 23.5 kilos. Well, that's too low. Let's say 60.5 kilos or 150 pounds. 150.5 pounds. Then in that case, integer is not the right type of function to use. You would want to use float. So it all depends on the context.